Chapter 4 Commander-in-Chief. Jack and Annie ran along the river bank. The wind whooshed over the cold water. Wet snowflakes hissed in the dark. But then Jack heard other sounds. He heard voices, lots of voices. He and Annie soon came upon hundreds and hundreds of soldiers gathered near the dark river. Many carried oil lanterns. The lanterns gave an eerie glow to the snowy twilight. "The captain and his men must be here somewhere," said Jack, looking around. Boats, like giant canoes, were tied near the river. Men were leading horses and loading cannons onto the boats. "What are they doing?" said Annie. Jack pulled out the Revolutionary War book. He read in a whisper. "On Wednesday, December 25th, 1776. "December 25th? That's Christmas," said Annie. "Today's Christmas?" "Cool," said Jack. He started reading again. "On Wednesday, December 25th, 1776, the Patriots were losing the war. Ragged and weary, many were ready to give up. Then something began to happen that would turn the war around. About 2,400 American patriots gathered on the west bank of the Delaware River in Pennsylvania. They prepared to cross the river to go on a secret mission." "A secret mission? Oh, man," said Jack. He started to pull out his notebook. "Attention! Troops! The commander-in-chief!" a soldier shouted. Jack and Annie saw a man in a dark cape and a three-cornered hat ride up on a white horse. The commander-in-chief loomed over the crowd of soldiers. His cape flapped in the wind. He sat calmly and with dignity on the back of his horse. Even at a distance, Jack thought the commander-in-chief looked familiar. Very familiar, but he couldn't figure out why. "A dangerous mission lies before you all," the man shouted above the wind. "But I want you to have courage. You must remember the words of Thomas Paine." The commander-in-chief held up a piece of paper. He read it to his men. "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldiers and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of men and women." "Wow, that's great," whispered Annie. Listening to the powerful words, Jack felt his spirits rise too. "The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph," the commander-in-chief read on. "What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only that gives everything its value." There was silence, as if everyone were thinking about the words the man had read. Then the soldiers started cheering and clapping. They didn't seem tired at all anymore. Now they seemed eager to set out on their mission. The commander-in-chief saluted his men. He steered his horse toward the river. As the horse moved past them, Jack got a better look at the rider. He gasped. "Oh, of course," he thought. He had seen that face before on dollar bills. Jack grabbed Annie's arm. "I know who the commander-in-chief is," he exclaimed. "He's George Washington." Chapter 5 The Letter. "George Washington? Really?" said Annie. "Yeah, I think he is," said Jack. "Wow, where'd he go?" said Annie. "I want to see him again. Come on." She started toward the river. "Wait, don't go too far," Jack said. "I just want to make sure it's him." He opened the Revolutionary War book. He found a picture of the boats on the river bank. He read, "When George Washington gathered his troops by the Delaware River, he was commander-in-chief of the whole American army. The general led the army for 6 years until America became a free and independent nation. In 1789, he was elected the first president of the new United States." "Oh man, it is him," said Jack. He pulled out his notebook and wrote, "General George Washington helped America become independent." "Hey, what are you writing?" someone asked. Jack looked up. A bearded soldier was pointing at him. Jack shoved the Revolutionary War book and his notebook into his bag. "Nothing, sir," he said. He started walking away. The man shouted after Jack, but Jack ran down toward the river and lost himself in the crowd of soldiers. When he looked over his shoulder, he was relieved. The bearded man was nowhere in sight. "Stop, young man!" Someone shone a lantern right in Jack's face. Jack gasped. It was the captain. "I told you to go home, Jack," the captain said sternly. "Where's your sister?" Jack looked around. Where was Annie? I don't know, he said. Find her at once and go back to your family, the captain ordered. Our secret mission is very important. Children will only get in the way. Yes, sir, said Jack. The captain started to leave, but he stopped. I wonder if you could do me a favor, Jack, he asked. Sure, said Jack. The captain pulled out his letter. This is my letter to my children, he said. It's a farewell letter. Would you please take it back with you to Fort Frog Creek? Yes, sir, said Jack. You must only send it if you hear that we have failed in our mission and many patriots were lost, said the captain. Yes, sir, said Jack. The captain handed his letter to Jack. I copied the general's speech for my children, the captain said. If anything happens to me, I hope those words will give them courage. The captain then turned and disappeared into the crowd. Good luck, Captain, Jack called. He hoped he would never have to send a letter to the man's children. Suddenly, Jack clutched the letter to his chest. Send, he whispered. This letter was the writing they'd been looking for, something to send. He and Annie could go home now. Their mission was over. Jack shoved the captain's letter into his bag. Now he just had to find Annie. As he looked around, he shivered. Where is she? Talking to his crew. We can't go with him, said Jack. We'll get in the way of his secret mission. Besides, we have something to send now. What? How? Said Annie. A letter. The captain gave me his letter to take back to Frog Creek, said Jack. We're only supposed to send it if something bad happens to the captain. We can go home now. Oh, can't we go a little later? Annie asked. Jack climbed into the boat to pull her out. No, come on, he said, taking her hand. Suddenly the crew moved to the back of the boat, near Jack and Annie. The men grabbed their oars and started pushing the boat away from the shore. We're off, said Annie. No, we have to get out, Jack said to the rowers, but the men were working too hard to pay attention. They were using their oars to hack up the ice at the edge of the river. Excuse me, Jack said in a loud voice. Just then, the boat jolted forward. Jack nearly lost his balance. The boat broke through more ice. Rough waves sloshed against its side. We have to go back, said Jack. Too late, said Annie. They were headed across the Delaware River. Chapter 6. Crossing the Delaware. The huge boat rocked in the water. Giant chunks of ice smashed against its sides. Thanks a lot, Annie, Jack whispered. He shivered in the snowy cold. We're not supposed to go on their secret mission with them. It's okay, she whispered. Maybe we can help George Washington. Are you nuts? Jack whispered. We should be on our way home now. The boat hit a piece of ice. The boat bounced, then dipped into the river. Jack clung to the wooden side. He hoped they wouldn't turn over. Nobody could survive in this icy water, he thought. It would be like sinking on the Titanic. The crew fought hard to keep the boat moving forward. They rowed past chunks of ice into a smoother part of the river. Light from the oil lamps shone on the water, making the ice chunks behind them glow like huge, glittering jewels. Jack looked back. Other boats were following them. They were filled with soldiers, horses, and cannons. Where exactly are we going? Annie whispered. Jack shrugged. He reached into his bag and pulled out the Revolutionary War book. By the dim lantern light in the boat, he searched through the book. He found a painting of George Washington crossing the Delaware River. He showed the painting to Annie. They each read the caption silently. After George Washington crossed the Delaware, he led his men on a 9-mile march to a British post. The post was filled with Hessians, German soldiers hired by the British to fight for them. The American patriots caught them off guard. The Hessians never thought the patriots would attack on a stormy Christmas night. It was a great victory for the patriots. They captured almost 1,000 Hessians. Hardly any of Washington's men were lost. Yay! We don't have to send the captain's letter, Annie exclaimed. Shh, said Jack. But George Washington turned around and looked back at Jack and Annie. Oh no, Jack thought, caught again. He closed his eyes, as if that would make him invisible. He's coming, said Annie. Jack looked up. George Washington was making his way back toward them. In the next moment, the commander-in-chief loomed above them like a giant shadow. Children? He asked in a quiet, angry voice. Sorry, Jack squeaked. Merry Christmas, said Annie. But George Washington did not say Merry Christmas back. Chapter 7. Spies. What are you doing here? George Washington asked. The commander-in-chief sounded furious. We made a mistake, Jack said. We didn't mean to come. George Washington turned to the rowers. "Who let these children sneak aboard?" he asked in a stern voice. The men looked at Jack and Annie with surprise. "It's not their fault," Annie said quickly. "They were working too hard to notice us." Just then the boat banged against the ice. The ice cracked, the boat moved on, then bumped against the shore. Two soldiers jumped out and pulled the boat up on shore. George Washington looked at Jack and Annie. "This boat is returning to get more men," he said. "When it does, you two will get out and stay on the shore." "Yes, sir," said Jack. He felt very embarrassed. George Washington then gave orders to the rowers. "Make sure these children do not board any other boats when you return," he said. The general stepped onto the riverbank. The wind started to pick up. The snow fell harder. As the crew unloaded the boat, neither Jack nor Annie spoke. Jack was miserable. They had caused trouble for George Washington, just when the general was trying to make America an independent nation. Jack desperately wished he and Annie had gone home earlier. They watched more and more boats land on the riverbank. As the soldiers unloaded their weapons and horses, a freezing rain began. Now rain, snow, and sleet fell together. Jack heard George Washington call to one of his men. "The storm is getting worse, Major," the general said. "Yes, sir," said the major. "I think we're in for a blizzard," said Washington. "Yes, sir, our mission may be hopeless, sir," said the major. "Should we call it off?" "No, you shouldn't," Jack whispered. "You're going to win." "Should we turn back, sir?" the major said. "No, no," said Annie. She stood up. The boat rocked. "Don't turn back, George Washington, sir," she shouted. "You have to march on, sir. You have to attack the Hessians, sir." "Shh!" Jack tried to pull Annie back down. "We're not supposed to know about their secret mission." "How does she know our plans, Major?" George Washington asked. "Listen to us, sir," said Annie. "You're going to win." She pulled away from Jack and jumped out of the boat. "Annie!" Jack leaped onto the riverbank. He scrambled after Annie up the steep, icy slope. "You have to lead your men, George Washington, sir," Annie said. "The Hessians will be surprised. They think no army will be marching on a night like this." "How do you know all this?" the major shouted above the storm. "How do you know what the Hessians are doing and thinking?" I... For once, Annie seemed at a loss for words. "She just guessed," Jack said. Just then, the bearded soldier who had yelled at Jack earlier stepped forward. "I saw this boy earlier," he said. "He was writing things down." "No, I was just..." Now Jack was at a loss for words. "Seize them!" the major shouted. "They're spies!"